So today we're going to talk about growing up your business, which is really in the wheelhouse of some of you in here because you have a baby. And I'm not talking about a physical baby. I almost walked in here with a baby. But you have this baby, and it's that thing you do. It's that thing you're passionate about that you've turned into a business. And it's just you, or it's just you and a partner, or it's just, a couple of you who have this thing and you want to see this thing be something greater. But how do you get there? So we want to talk about what scaling is. Simply put, scaling is growing your business quickly with big profits. Now, there is a certain part of the community here and beyond that feels that the word profit is evil. But the word profit, there's nothing evil about that word. Profit simply means that you have enough value in your product above the cost to produce it that you can do some really great things. Now, what you do with profit can determine whether or not you're doing well or not doing well from a morality standpoint. But until you make a profit, you really don't have a business, you have a hobby. I like Mustangs, not the horse, the car. And there's a desire in me to take the frame of like a 1964 and a half, a 1965, 66, and rebuild it. But that's not a business, that's a hobby. Now, if a guy has a shop and he rebuilds classic cars for a living and it costs him $10,000 to rebuild a Mustang and he sells it for $25,000, now he has a business. And you have to look at yourself on whether or not I have a business or a hobby. And if I do really have a business, then you want to achieve scaling. In a perfect world, it would be easy, right? Well, they say if it's easy, everybody would do it. Starting and owning a small business and trying to take it bigger is hard. It's very hard. Some days you don't want to get out of bed. Some days it's like, why don't I just go back to what I was doing, working for somebody else. I had the steady income. I had all of this, going for me. I had insurance, whatever it is. You're like, I might as well go back. And you have to literally coach yourself into going in and doing it again today and trying to grow this thing. It's not easy. When Sean and I decided to expand what the Business Monthly publication was and what it was doing, it was scary and it was hard, and it required a lot of counting the cost. What if it fails? Will it kill the company if we fail? Will it kill me if we succeed? And so you have to understand doing that. So first, to scale, you need to figure out what you are. If you are content with the amount of work that you have in the desired field that you are in, and it can all rely on you, you make a great living, and you can do this for the next 50 years, then stop. Be right where you are. But if you're not satisfied with that, if you want to make a bigger impact, if you want to have a greater reach, if you want to do even more, if you want to grow it beyond your own capability to handle, then you need to take the next step in scaling.
I mean, you have basically two classes of business, which we'll talk about in a second, called startups and small businesses. That term is used interchangeably. People say that you have startup, small business all the time. I started a small business, or I'm a startup. They're very different. And one can be the other, but the other can't be, So we're going to talk a little bit about that here in just a second.
Number one, you got to have a product that can grow. Number two, I have a very good friend. I go to a chiropractor twice a week, and he's helping me with some of my leg issues and others. But the problem is he can't scale his business. Why? Because everything is reliant upon him. He doesn't have nurses and assistants that can administrate what he does. He's the one, you got to lay on his table, he puts the machines on you, he does that. He can only grow as far as his own physical ability will allow him. So he doesn't, now that product, chiropractic care by him, cannot grow beyond that measure. So he cannot scale that. But what he can scale are other aspects of his business, from the health, health and healthy living and healthy nutrition and those types of things. He can scale other types of procedures. There's things like lasers that they do to help with, what's it called when you got the pain in your feet? Myopathy? But he's got all these other things that can scale beyond him, so he can scale that area. So you have to find out, what product do I have that can scale? You need a platform. If you have the greatest product in the world and nobody there knows that you do it, you're never going to be successful in business.
And the platform's is accurately named, because if you don't have a strong platform, you can't grow up.
Platform comes from the standpoint, you remember the guys that used to stand on the corner and they called him the town crier, and they would scream out the news, from the corner. If you saw your history books, you know it. In our increasingly noisy world, we're being inundated with sales messages, with buy me, see me, do this, you need to eat that, you need to go there. And if you have a great product, you've got to get above all that noise to where people can hear you. And if you don't have a platform, you can't scale your business. You can get all the cogs in place to produce. You could be Henry Ford with the first assembly line, but if nobody wants to buy a car, it doesn't do you any good. And if nobody knows that cars exist, which they really didn't at that time, then you're not going to sell a car. But because of building a platform, back then it was a lot easier. There was a lot more word of mouth. It would take off. Today there's so much noise. You have to establish your platform, and that's another lesson for another time. But trust me, if you get a book and you want to establish a platform, get the book Platform by Michael Hyatt. It is excellent. You'll see a reference to it in this month's issue of Biz. It will radically change how you see scaling your business, because until you have a platform, you're never going to scale, at least not at the level you want to.
You need to systemize, because you could have the greatest product in the world, know who you are, and be able to get your message out to other people. But if you can't replicate that process in a different place, then it's still all dependent on you. And that means you're not going to scale, because the buck will stop with you.
Anybody in here watch Big Bang Theory? There we go. Do y'all remember the episode where Penny created the little flower bow things, the hair things? And they tried to scale it, and production couldn't keep up with it. They were up all night, and then they got another order for another 1,000, and it's like, no, we quit. If you don't systemize, if you don't have a way to meet the need, you'll grow yourself right out of business. Look at all of the businesses that expanded so far that they went out of business. Anybody in Shreveport-Bossier remember Heilig Myers Furniture? Heilig Myers Furniture was one of the largest furniture retailers in the South. They were mainly located in Alabama, Panhandle of Florida, a little bit in Georgia, and they decided to cross the mighty Mississippi, come into Mississippi and Louisiana, and it got too big for them to handle. And it killed the entire company. If you can't systemize to the place where you can handle the growth, then you're going to be in a world of hurt. So,
who are you?
Who are you?
What are you? I mean, these are questions that you guys have to ask yourselves. I think everybody in here has a business they want to scale, right? So that's step number one. What am I trying to do? What is my product? What message am I sending? And once you figure that out, then you got a good idea of who you are. And it's as simple as starting with a mission statement. We've talked about that before in here, but if you have a very simple, it can be, I've seen our mission statement is like 4 sentences, because, work in a newspaper, so we like to write, yeah. But you can essentially boil it down to 1 sentence that Jerry pointed out for our paper. You can boil it down to 1 sentence for Biz. And that's really, if you can boil it down like that, then you got a mission statement. And that's really who you are.
Jim, I think about your business a lot, and your business is really a connector. You connect different types of businesses that have products that other people want, but not necessarily have the ability or the desire to exchange dollars, you know. And because there was a need in the marketplace, you have a viable business, you have a viable startup going on here. But if it was all contingent on your ability to go to person A and tell them what person B has to offer, you could never scale. So you have the Accelerated Business Exchange website, where the listing of everybody and what they have to offer is all together, to where it's almost self-serve, but you are still the catalyst for facilitating that exchange. And that really illustrates systemizing. It really illustrates knowing what you are and saying, okay, how do I scale what I am to something that's bigger than me?
And we talked a little bit about this yesterday on our ride to Dallas, but sometimes everybody wants to, it seems like everybody, when they want to scale or they want to grow, they want to have the money to pay for that growth, right? You know, I need another person, so I got to be making this much over so I can afford their salary. Sometimes you have to find a way to just invest and let it sort itself out.
Yeah, if you look at the examples of companies that we like to follow, Amazon, Zappos,
Apple.
If you read the stories, they did not make a profit, invest the profit, grow, make a profit, invest the profit, grow. They said, we've got an idea that we know will scale. And I'm going to go to so-and-so here, and I'm going to convince them that they need to invest. Thank God for angel investors. Thank God for venture capitalists, you know, in the dot-com boom, that get the idea that they can get return on investment because things can scale. So you go and you find that way to get the money plugged in, and then you put the systems in place and you get all the holes filled to where you're completely prepared to scale. Now there is a little bit greater risk in that, because not just because you figured you've answered all the questions doesn't mean the business is going to be successful. It may be the wrong time, it may be the wrong product, you may have some bad eggs in the basket. You just don't know. But to scale, it requires an investment on the front end, because you're not going to have the money to do it all on the front end. That was one of the things that he and I talked about, you know. And I know we tie a lot of things back to biz itself, but we realize that biz, in order to scale to where we know the potential for it to be, is going to require an investment. It's going to require somebody putting in a significant amount of capital to help us get it over the hump, because I am a control freak. Just ask him. I'm the type of individual, and he's kind of the same way too, that I can just about learn how to do anything. And I can, like, okay, we need a new website. I'm going to go build the new website, and I'm going to fight through it, and I'm going to put the very best thing out there because I know I can figure it out, et cetera. But is that the best use of my time? Well, I don't have any money to pay somebody. Well, guess what? Until you get that website launched, you're not going to have any money coming in to pay anybody down the line anyway. And if it takes you 2 months to launch the website because you got 18 other things to do, when it could have just taken a week or two to be done by somebody whose job it is to do that, you got a greater opportunity for return on investment if you go ahead and bite the bullet and spend the money.
What does Gary Vaynerchuk say about if you do something, if you have somebody and they don't do it 100% the way you want it, but they do it 75% of the way? Accept it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Just because they don't do it the way you'd have done it doesn't mean they did it wrong.
If they're
and that's one of the lessons that's hard for me to get.
If they give you 75% of what you want, that's good enough to get you to your goal.
Yeah. You're looking for, get me to the goal, get me to the goal, get me to the goal. Small business, new or old, lifestyle business, these all have limited growth. This is the business model of, I have something, I take what little thing I've got, I start on my kitchen counter and I start my business, and then I make a profit, and then I go a little bit bigger, and then I go a little bit bigger, and then I go a little bit bigger. This is the standard business model for eons about how to build your business. But the problem is, in this growth, it's very difficult to scale, because you end up, even if you have a flood of revenue opportunities, you don't have the ability to fill the orders, no matter what it is. Because you simply don't have the infrastructure built to handle it.
Or if you're a lifestyle business, you don't want to. You want to have just enough money to support what you're trying to do, to support you, and you're an absentee owner, or it's just enough to pay your salary, or it's just enough to pay the salary of your people. And that's all you want. You don't want to be in 30 different locations. You don't want to be Cane's, you know. You want to be Chicken Express in South Bossier.
And it's okay if that's what you want to be, because some people are content with that. Let's use the cosmetology industry, barbers and cosmetologists. They are limited, just like the chiropractor, to what they can do on their own. And I don't know if y'all know how it works at most places, but most of these salons that you go to, the cosmetologists don't work for the salon. They rent the space, and they're independent contractors or independent businesses unto themselves, and they pay rent for the space, and that's how the salon makes money. So in a sense, that every hairdresser, every barber that you see is their own small business, and they're content with that. But now, one of those barbers decides, you know what, I could own one of these things, or I could own 12 of these things. I know where to find the best barbers. I know where to find the best and brightest. I know how to develop a marketing plan. You know, these people don't market jack squat for me. You know, I could do, you know, and all of a sudden they want to scale a business. All of a sudden they've moved from small business
to a startup. It's new. When I say new, I mean one day to a max of 5 years, generally. When you get to be 5 years, you're starting to get a little long in the tooth for being a startup. They're made to grow quickly. So, you know, that's why you hear the term startup applied to almost every software company there is, because they're in a field that and so they're growing quickly and they're making a ton of profit.
You know, podcasts, in a lot of ways, are startups. I know a fellow, one of the podcasts I follow is called Entrepreneur on Fire. The guy's name is John Lee Dumas. And he started up with the idea that I commute every day, but yet my podcasts that I follow are only once a week or once a month. Why isn't it there a daily podcast about people like me that are setting the world on fire and really being successful? So he does a 7-day-a-week podcast. He interviews somebody who has started and scaled their business or businesses, and he started in 2012. Started in 2012 in his living room. He is still in his living room, by the way, but he has scaled his business to where it makes 6 figures a month. A month.
Yeah, his living room probably has a studio in it now. But.
And what has he done? The podcast built him a platform, okay? People start following because they resonated. Hey, I want a daily podcast. I want to hear from the movers and shakers. I want to do this. I'll listen to it every day on my way to work or on my run or whatever. Then, when he started getting lots of listeners, lots of downloads, sponsors came knocking on the door. Hey, we want to be a part of this. So then he started, selling out to the man. He started selling the sponsorships because they were of value. He had his website started having value. Then he started adding, he goes, wait a minute, we've gained a lot of experience in the podcasting world. Why don't we start a podcasting webinar community, using the platform of Entrepreneur on Fire? So they started Podcasters Paradise. All of that happens, and the more traction you got, guess what? The phone starts ringing. Hey, John, we want you to come talk at this social media conference, or we want you to come talk at this podcasting conference. And all of a sudden, you're commanding, public speaker, big time money. He's still in his living room, and he has scaled this business. And what's really cool, if you follow him, he puts his financial report. He does a podcast of his financial report every month. And of that 6 figures, over $100,000 to $200,000 each month, his net expenses are usually around 40 to 50. Think about that. We're just happy if we make $1 in the black. And here's a guy that's doubling and tripling. Why? Because he could scale. He found something he could scale. Now, I'm not saying you go into the world going, hey, this is what we're going to do. But at the same time, understand that it's possible. A lot of us don't think it's possible because everybody that we're in circles with are barely on either side of break even. Each month it rolls, and you're like, wait, is this thing ever gonna roll? Is this thing ever gonna grow? Yes, it can, but you just got to decide, what am I, and do I want to scale it?
So, what's your product? Can your product grow? That's the second question. That's pretty simple. I mean, if you are, like Dave said, if you're a chiropractor in Shreveport-Bossier, you probably can't scale if you're a private practice. So that sort of limits you right there. You know what you are. But if you have a product that you can replicate in other places, then you're working with something.
A group of doctors knew that they were limited. They made good money, really good money in their profession. But they knew that there was more that they could do. They wanted to not only scale their investments, but they also wanted to help people live healthier lifestyles. And so they got together and created a little company that you might know of by the name of Subway. Subway is continues to be the fastest growing fast food franchise in the world. And if you watch the commercials, there'll always be a little thing, copyright 2014, I think it's the Doctors Group or something like that. It provided a way. A doctor knew they couldn't scale what they physically could do, but they could take what they have done and apply it in a way that could scale. And what they did is they you end up hiring business people, you end up hiring those that can do what you can't do. Because when you have money, you can do lots of things. When you have no money, you can't do anything. And so you have to look, I want to add some people. Well, how am I going to add people? Well, I've got to scale. Sean and I, in our trip yesterday, looked at each other and said, we can only do so much.
And do it right.
And do it right. So if biz is going to be everything that biz needs to be, we need to find the people. Well, we don't have the money to find the people. It doesn't matter. Let's find the investment money, enough to cover somebody or somebody's or whatever. Because when you think about it, can you afford to hire somebody? No. Can you afford to hire somebody that's producing? Yes. Sometimes you have to bite the bullet, take the chance, and see.
That's where the risk comes in.
Yes. And so as you look at it, this is what you want to do. You want to scale. You want to make it bigger and better. In the newspaper industry used to be huge profits. I mean, 20 to 40% profit at any given newspaper, any given month. And you really didn't have to do a whole lot to achieve it. If you remember, if you're my age or older, you remember that in your local newspaper, you would have the big grocery store ads, pages and pages of grocery store ads, and your wife or yourself would decide what you would get that week based upon what was on sale at the grocery store. And
you actually looked at the classifieds because there wasn't a Craigslist, and it was like 7
and so
pages.
There was a lot of scalability in newspapers. But then as everything else, as the cheese moved, the scalability of the newspaper product shrunk, okay? Now, it's still a viable product. It's still something that communities need, and it's still something that can make money, but it's not going to make the insane amount of cash flow that it once did. But every newspaper or every business has the potential to find something else that can scale. And in our case, we realize that biz is the thing that can scale. So we are going to invest in biz. We have been investing in biz at a greater measure than even in our primary, what we consider our primary product, because we know that biz at a scalable level can supplement or do all of those things that the newspaper used to do. I'll give you another quick example. You say, well, wait, does gross revenue matter? No. I can have a business that does $100,000 a month and only make $1,000, but I can have another business that does $30,000 a month and makes 10. Which one is the better business? The 30,000, because it was able to scale. And we have that in the ebb and flow of the way things work. I actually own a printing company in Minden. And in certain months, it does well, and then certain months it drops. Everything drops in January, but that's because of Christmas. But like recently, we've been watching the decline, if you will, of advertising revenues in regular newspapers. But guess what? It's political season in Minden. And guess what? We're the only printer in town. So even though they make gross less, the profit that they made subsidized the shortfalls of the newspaper entities. So you always have to look at that margin. What makes great margin? If you could add just 10% in total revenue to your bottom line and subtract 10% in expenses. I'm not talking about, you could talk about some huge margin swings where you would have revenue to do some great things. Simply by just a little bit of a 10% shift either way. And a lot of times for a lot of companies, 10% is not felt very much. But it's the understanding of the scale that will help you understand that you can add people, you can add locations, etc. It's not the chiropractor who does well. It's the guy that owns the joint franchise that has them all over Dallas and over into here that's really scaling. But it wasn't until he decided or got some investors or decided to invest their own money to begin scaling it. As long as you're, and it's hard. Entrepreneurs, it's hard. You know why? Because you take that baby to bed with you every night. You wake up and the first thing you think about is it in the morning. You take it to lunch with you. It's real hard to take a step back and say, okay, all things being equal, what do I need to do to make this thing bigger? And not just the production of what we do, the execution of what we do. You have to be able to take that step back.
Do you have a platform? Question number 3. And what is your platform? Go ahead to the next slide, because there's some things. Is it social media? Is it emails? Is it networking? Is it all the above? If it's good, it should be all the above.
One thing you need to remember, control what you can control. Facebook is constantly changing their algorithms. What worked to get you on people's timelines yesterday is not necessarily what will work today. But what you can control is the content of your website. So what you do is you create the very best presence you can that can be reached by the largest audience that you need to reach. And then you direct people back to your home base. And you use all of these things to do it. Social media, that's the easy one. It's free. Even if you don't like Twitter, you need to be on Twitter. Even if you don't like Instagram, you need to be on Instagram. And certainly Facebook. Email marketing. A lot of people think this is a dinosaur in the realm of things. But let me tell you, email marketing done the right way is still the very best way to get engagement from people in a professional manner. If you've signed up for something from us, you receive an email from us, you don't consider it spam and you at least give it a glance across. Now, unsolicited email is a whole different ball of wax. I'm talking about solicited email. When you sign up for the Biz Breakfast, when we have our sign-up sheet, and you put your email address down, you know that more than likely we're going to send you something. And you're putting it down saying, you know what, I recognize that, and that'll work. Networking.
Your event.
Networking is vitally important. This is your pond.
It's really the hardest one for a lot of people.
That's one of the reasons we had Jerry in several weeks ago doing Winning the Room. Networking in the local market is the best way to build influence because it's always in an area where you're not trying to push product.
I talked to an Infusionsoft consultant week before last, and I said, give me lead capture ideas. What's lead capture strategy? Networking. He said, I know that's unsexy, but it's the most effective. This is a guy who's supposed to be helping me do email marketing, and he tells me to go out and shake hands and meet people. And
for us, it's been one of the big frustrations because even like on the podcast, we put it out there. We put a lot of effort into the podcast. You'd be amazed at what effort we put in to produce this, to only have a handful of people listen to it on a regular basis. We're like, this is great stuff. Why is not more people? Because not enough people know about it. We're not networking enough. You've got to be intentional. Now, there's a way to social network and get people to share stuff, and that's all well and good. But for bona fide followers who turn into fans, who turn into product sales, you've got to put the personal touch to it.
And they're also kind of ranked in reverse order of memory. Social media generally doesn't last. That's why it's constant, and you have to be constantly reminded. I mean, look at Twitter. People send out 100 tweets a day. You have email marketing, which is kind of like in the middle. It might make an impact. You might get a response out of someone. But if you network, and you make a connection with somebody, you got them.
Now, one of the things we're going to do, we're not going to do it today, but at the next biz, we're going to test some theories on email, on social media. One of the things I'm going to have y'all do is bring your phones, and we're all going to take pictures of each other and post them on Facebook and on our social media. And we're going to track and see how many reshares we get. Because if you think about it, each one of us has a network of followers and people you engage. But,
there you go.
And we'll see. And let's see if that affects the next biz breakfast. Be an interesting little study.
Experiment. Automation. Can you automate your processes elsewhere?
Remember what I said about building websites? I don't need to be building websites. I need to be running my business. And the worst part for me is I enjoy doing it. You ever enjoy doing something that you shouldn't be doing? That shouldn't be your priority, but it's so, you kind of like, I'm the little kid that wants his work put on the refrigerator by mom. So I'll like design ads and stuff just so people go, wow, Dave, that's awesome.
It's the salesperson in you.
It is.
You got to get the pat on the back.
But that's not what my primary job should be. And every moment, if you think about it, think about what you would like to make, salary-wise. Is it $100 an hour? $50 an hour? $500 an hour? More? Now, divide that out by the amount of time you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing. You are the most expensive employee you have. Why would you have you do stuff that somebody at a much lower rate could do for you? And there's plenty of things out there. One of my favorite websites as of late is one called Fiverr, Fiverr.com. There's a whole host of services from recording voiceovers to editing content to whatever for $5. That's the whole point. All the people's pitches on there is for $5. Now, if you want a little bit more, then it's more. But I'll give you a great example. Just about everybody in here was here for the podcast recording here at Cohab. Now, if you listen, you hear a great echo in the room. And it came through horribly on the recording, and I slightly stressed. But then I went to Fiverr, and I found a guy who knew how to do audio engineering for podcasts with a focus on live events. And so I reached out to him. For $25, I gave him access to a Dropbox. He processed my file in 24 hours. It came back, and you almost can't tell that we were in a room. It even captured y'all's voices coming up to that microphone or not coming up to the microphone better than I ever could have. Was it worth $25 to me? You betcha. Was it worth not having the stress of worrying about whether or not to go through line by line, listening to a 45-minute podcast? You betcha. And so there are certain things that you should offload. I forget who the speaker was that said it, but they said, you should do what only you can do and let others do what they can do. Even though you don't want to. Even though you enjoy doing some of it. Sometimes it's better.
Well, is your business in a scale content or scale
That's a hard question. Because that's one of the things that we were talking about on the way to Dallas. The magazine is almost becoming a separate entity to Biz Tools. And Biz Tools will scale primarily online through things like BizU, the membership site, and maybe some sponsorships from some big boys that take interest in us. BizMag will scale as a news and education product, but also as a connector to local businesses. So they're almost two completely different things, but they both can scale very well and under
They both share the
banner.
same mission.
Yeah.
They're just accomplishing it different ways. And BizMag is really local. I mean, it's almost limited to being Shreveport-Bossier.
Yeah, it's short of the Dave Ramsey column. There's nothing in there that's
Whereas
not
Biz
locally
Tools
generated.
can reach, anybody. I mean, we had like some downloads for the podcast from like Seattle and places like that. And
crazy
I'm like,
stuff. And you're like, why do y'all care? Y'all got Microsoft up there. What do y'all care?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. In scaling what we do, we recognize that it's two different levels and two different types of scaling. For the magazine, we're only going to be able to scale, at least initially, Shreveport-Bossier. But if the model works, we might can be able to replicate it in other cities, thereby scaling it on a broader scale.
Yeah.
Scale.
Scale.
But also, but the online can scale worldwide from Bossier City, Louisiana, if we do it right, and what we believe that the content's valuable. We believe that what we're doing is helping people, and if people believe that as well, then it will scale on its own.
And you have to be able to systemize and automate and replicate by having people you trust. If you don't have a team, it's not going to work. If you don't hire good people, you can't replicate the process because they're going to let you down. I mean, I'll take the paper, for example. The paper, it doesn't scale, but I've replicated and systemized because I don't have time to be the editor really anymore. So luckily I have a reporter who I trust more than I've ever entrusted any team member in my life. And every week we meet and we plan. And we go, Monday we're going to do this, Tuesday we're going to do this, Wednesday we're going to do this, Thursday we're going to do this, and Friday, if you've done all those things, I don't care, you can take off. But if those things don't work out, here's some contingency plans. And if you need this, you need to call these people. And so we have a system set up where every Monday we meet and we know we need this many things. We're going to talk to these people. We're going to get it from this place. We're going to do it this way. And we're going to have these backup stories. And these backup stories are always evergreen. So if it doesn't work out next week, you have them. And then I go. And then she's got a plan, a roadmap to do it. I don't have to sit there and worry and freak out and go, oh God, oh man, I got such, I know it's going to be taken care of. And I trust her to do it. If you have a bad employee and you do all that, then you've wasted your time and effort and brain power and still have that, I hope that person doesn't. So you gotta have somebody you trust, because you can systemize and automate all you want.
I can do a lot of things. Me plus one person who gets what I do can do a lot more things. Me plus two people who get what I do and understand what I do can do a lot more things. But the caveat is people respect what you inspect. Meaning you don't just say, okay, this is how we're going, go. Otherwise you end up with a bad McDonald's in, some little bitty town. It's those that understand, not only do I have to train people, but I have to hold them accountable down the line. And nobody likes that. Nobody likes to be the bad guy coming and say, you're doing it wrong, or you need to do it like this, or whatever. But you still have to have that level of inspection, or no, you're not going to replicate properly. You're going to wonder, why is the original business I built still doing well, but yet these ones that should do equally well or even better than my original are not? Well, the one that you originally built does well because you like going there more than you like going to the others. Presence has a lot to do with how well people perform. And so you have to understand that. And as a leader, if you're wanting to scale your business, you have to have people, A, you can trust, and B, that you can inspect without them getting all bent out of shape.
So, to recap, how can I reach more customers? What new revenue streams can I tap into? How can I reduce costs? And what can I automate? Those are all the key questions you need to know if you can scale or not.
And you'd be amazed at how many, if you'll sit down and ask yourself these questions, the ideas that come flowing in. They won't all be practical, but the fact is you probably haven't sat down and asked yourself these questions before. The first thing, the thing that you've been concentrating on, that all of us do that are in startup mode, is getting the thing off the ground. If I can just get it off the ground, if I can just get a prototype built, if I can just get a case of them done, if I can just set up and have a booth at such and such, or if I can, that's great. It's awesome. You've done your research, but now how do I make this reach more people? How do I do that? And by asking yourself these questions, you'll go a long way into getting there.
And sometimes you climb the mountain to get heard here, and you want to scale, you got to do it all over again. You climb the first hill, and then there's a bigger hill waiting right over, and you just, if you want to stay in that valley, that's fine.
You should ask yourself these questions at least once a year, if not once every 6 months. When we launched Biz as Biz back in June of 2013, we thought we had all these questions answered. We're going to do a magazine. Magazine's going to be awesome, and we're going to send it all to Shreveport and Bossier chamber members, and we're going to, that's completely different now. Oh, I can lay out a magazine one day a month. That's no big deal. I'll get all the contributors involved. This thing will automate. It'll rock and roll. It's changed. You have to reevaluate all the time because you want to scale to scale to scale to scale. And it may mean doing something completely different. In Minden, for instance, and I've told y'all some of the story, my children who don't really have an interest in the newspaper business because newspapers are dinosaurs to them are launching a venture with my backing to fix iPhones, iPads, Mac computers, etc. in Minden. Not going to be in competition with Thomas. Don't get mad at me, Thomas. But at the same time, you know, this is something that they're passionate about. And so we asked ourselves these questions, and we're building a small town business with the thought that it can be elsewhere. So we're building a brand that's easily recognizable. We're doing the things on a level that if you were to walk into the store, you would think it's a franchise of something that's huge. Why are we doing that? Because we know that at some point we might want to scale this, and this will be another arm of what our company does. You know, we're a family company. One of the missions of our company is to take care of the founders and its team members. Well, if the newspaper is slowly washing away, we need some other way to take care of the team members, right? So we need to diversify. We need to do other things that are not washing away. And based upon the number of people that pre-ordered iPhone 6s, this ain't washing away anytime soon. So this is a viable business for us to do. But let me tell you, 6 months after they open, we need to look at these questions again and say, okay, how do we go from we're open, we're making a profit, I pray and hope, to scaling it to something bigger? You do it by asking these questions.
That's it.
Thank y'all for coming.